Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Book Club Favorites discussion of 2022. We are so excited to be joined today by the best-selling debut author, Jessamine Chan, to discuss her new novel, The School for Good Mothers, which has instantly hooked readers and book clubs all over. We are also joined today by two of my Simon Schuster colleagues, Elizabeth and Megan, who have helped to build the buzz around this fantastic dystopian-esque family drama. And before we jump into the discussion, I did want to remind you all viewers that, like always, we are hosting a giveaway to enter for a chance to win a copy of the novel we're discussing today, The School for Good Mothers, as well as an advanced reader's copy of another suspenseful novel called MAGPIE by Elizabeth Day. Drop a question for Jessamine in the comment section of this video. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can on screen today. And now I'll kick it over to our discussion leaders. Jessamine, why don't you give us a little brief overview about what the School for Good Mothers is about?
Well, hi, Holly. Thank you so much for that intro. The School for Good Mothers is about a Chinese-American single mom named Frida Liu who loses custody of her daughter, Harriet, after having one very bad day. So the book follows her quest to win her daughter back after she is sent to a newly created government institution where she's re-educated with mothers from all over the county. I like to describe it as sort of like 1984, but for moms.
I love that description, the 1984 for moms, because I feel like it really captures that feeling of scrutiny and, the policing of just everyday activities. And I know that also, you mentioned Frida has this one really bad day, but it's sort of this, the world that you've built is this kind of near future or near reality dystopia, in that a lot of people, when they've read it, they've talked about how it feels like this could be real. So it is dystopian, but it does also feel so close to the world that we are living in. So can you kind of tell us about how you came up with that idea and how you tied this idea of like a really powerful CPS program and look at how that created this world and some of your inspiration?
Well, I really like Holly's description of dystopian-esque, and I might just use that forever from now on. So that's because I've been describing it as dystopian minimalism, which is maybe not a real term, and I just was making that up. So I like dystopian-esque. So I got the idea for this book in early 2014 when I was trying to write a short story collection and had taken myself to a friend's house in upstate New York and was snowed in and coming up with one terrible idea after another for 10 days. And I think after about a week and a half, after my many days of nothing going well, I had a really good writing day. So Frida's very bad day comes out of my very good writing day. And some of the things going on in my life at that time was I was entering my late 30s and it was time to make a decision for me and my partner about whether or not we were going to have a baby. So it was time to choose a path. And I felt really crushing pressure and anxiety about making that decision. And so I was already thinking a lot about motherhood and ruminating on what it would mean for my life and things that I found really alarming about the culture. And a few months before that, I'd happened to read an article in the New Yorker by Rachel Aviv called "Where is Your Mother?", which is about a single mom who left her toddler son at home, and after that, they never got him back. So something about that story just really lodged in my mind. And in the world I created, there was a chance to both talk about the tragedy of family separation and cases where there's termination of parental rights, but also to talk about the larger culture. So I wanted to do both of those things, but also to answer some questions for myself about what motherhood might mean and like my feelings about becoming a mom in America.
Did you feel that in writing this book, you came to some surprising realizations or answers to the questions you were asking yourself?
I think what surprised me after I actually did have a baby, like after a couple of years of working on the draft, was I enjoyed it far more than I imagined. And it was really hard for me to imagine the fun and the joy, just because it was a scary decision for me, because my husband and I are both artists, and whenever we would talk about having a baby, he would start bringing up the melting of Greenland. Like, how can we bring a baby into this world? Like, there's not going to be any Earth left. And so it required being hopeful in a different way. And so that really surprised me in the writing. I have no idea if I just answered your question, but that was
that was great
answer.
You know, what's so funny is, you know, there are so many kind of terrifying moments in this book, and the whole world itself is very unsettling, and it makes you kind of like feel very on edge, which is, you know, really hat off to your world building and just like the line by line. I feel like it ramps up your anxiety as you're reading it, and it's also just so suspenseful and propulsive, and you can't put it down because you really want to just know what happens next. But I love this idea that you, in writing it and also in your kind of experience of becoming a mother yourself, you hung on to this idea of it being hopeful, because that is also something that I think is kind of an undercurrent throughout the book, is that, you know, Frida herself is a character, as like you've described in other interviews, as a character who's just like driven by love, but she's also driven by hope, and that she really wants to, she's trying to do everything she can to get back to her daughter, and that she has to hold on to this hope that she will get to the end of this program and she will get custody back. And I think that's one of the strongest parts about her as a character, is that she really is able to kind of persevere through this, you know, systematic oppression that she's going through at this school, which is really kind of more of like a imprisonment.
Yeah, this is tangentially related to your comment about hope. One thing that's been really challenging is, even during the like 2 years of the pandemic, we have had to stay upbeat for the sake of our daughter, who's 5, and so the pandemic is almost half her life now. And I mean, there's definitely been moments where I just want to burst into tears and like sink into the depression of it all, but I have to keep it together for her. So I guess I was imagining that hope and love and just the need to survive would keep the moms going in the school, even though it's such an oppressive system.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I hadn't really thought about how, with the age that your daughter is, that the pandemic has been half of her life, which is just such a poignant thing to realize. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about kind of the commentary on culture and how, you know, just diversity in parenting styles that you were able to capture. But first, I want to remind everyone watching that there is a giveaway for a copy of this book and a copy of an upcoming book being published by Simon & Schuster called MAGPIE. And you can enter for a chance to win both of those books by leaving a question in the comments below. So please leave some questions. We will be trying to answer as many of them as possible during the live. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, you know, Frida is a Chinese American woman. She has Chinese immigrant parents, and there's a lot of pressures that are described throughout the book of, you know, her feeling like she needs to live up to expectations, both from her Chinese cultural you know, background, and also as just like the idea of being a perfect parent, or being this ideal figure in the world of kind of modern parenting. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you found those inspirations, or how you were able to capture those feelings?
Well, I think I was writing it definitely informed by my own upbringing as a first generation Chinese American. So happy Lunar New Year to everyone also who's watching. And I think I was also reflecting on some aspects from the Rachel Aviv article, which was about a woman who's an immigrant and a native Arabic speaker. And it felt like it wasn't just that she wasn't a perfect mom in the eyes of the state. It was also that she wasn't a perfect American mother. So I built some of those ideas into the school, like measuring how affectionate the moms were, whether they spoke in the correct tone of voice. And I'm definitely someone who grew up in between cultures, and certain aspects of American family life have always been like kind of perplexing to me. Like in Asian cultures, to make a blanket generalization, it's not as physically affectionate. I think that's not a super controversial thing to say. It's not as huggy. It's not as much of a huggy and kissy kind of culture. And so any Asian mom wouldn't do so well by the measures of the school, because that's just not how how you're raised to interact with your kids. And as I watched my friends becoming parents, I definitely was noticing that the trend is definitely toward like being your child's pal rather than getting them to obey you, which is definitely not the kind of filial piety model of most Chinese families. So I was always looking at it from an outsider's perspective. And so that was one way to put additional pressure on Frida, and also to have her reckon with the privileges of being Asian in this system, but also the ways in which she's always going to be on the outside.
One of the things that really struck me in reading this was just how much race and economic status and background played into the women and their thoughts on parenting, how they were treated in the school. And I was curious to hear more about your thoughts on that, and what kind of you were drawing from real world experiences in writing that.
Well, in the reading that I did, it seems, I don't have all the statistics on hand, and I always, whenever I've talked about this, I've just been prefacing it by saying I'm writing fiction and I'm not a sociologist or journalist. But in the reading that I did, I think what's happened in the last few decades is that the phenomenon of the government taking someone's children, it disproportionately happens to mothers who are Black and brown and who are poor. So I think what I wanted in the book was to have the world of the school gesture toward that reality, even if it wasn't necessarily making a blanket public policy statement, and to just I hopefully inspire people to read more about the issue. I think once I started reading more about family separation in the US, I think I was just shocked that it's not on the front page of the news all the time, because there's actually so many kids taken away from their parents every year. And it's, to me, I found it shocking, and perhaps I shouldn't have, because it's been a problem for so long. But one article that was really helpful was in the New York Times several years ago, called The New Jane Crow. And it talked about how even landlords, for example, will dangle the threat of calling CPS on a family if they want to keep tenants in line, or moms who just went downstairs to pick up something from the front door, and the cops happened to be in front of the building and their baby was upstairs, and then they got their child taken away. So I think I just really shocked by some really innocuous offenses that would result in someone missing out on 6 months of their baby's life.
And the other thing that I kept thinking about when I was reading is that these are some of the situations that you just described are seen through the lens of, CPS or children being taken away. But it's also just the fighting against like systemic issues and oppression and things where if you don't have the right resources or the right answers or the right, if you don't have the money to fight something, then you're just put in such a difficult situation, and that can be applied to so many areas. And I think that's something that a lot of people are relating to in the book, is that there's this kind of, you're describing a very unique situation that also has universal feeling attached to it. And it's something that, not just parents will relate to as you're reading it. Like, I am not a mom. I don't have any young kids in my life really, but I can't, I was just so taken and moved by not only like kind of this perspective of motherhood, but also this, this frustration of like looking at a system that is just designed to make you fail. And I think that's something you capture so well. And going back to my comment about hope, it's just like, then you were also able to illustrate her hope in the face of this. We actually have a couple of questions from the chat. And again, a reminder to everyone, if you leave a question in the comments below, you'll be entered for a chance to win a copy of School for Good Mothers and also a copy of MAGPIE. And our first question is about your characters. And this is from Samantha. She asked, did you find any of your characters particularly likable or unlikable? And I just want to add on to that, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the likability of characters in fiction in general.
Oh, well, thank you, Samantha, for that question and the nice praise that you added for the book. I really appreciate it. I guess I don't really think about likability a lot when I work. I'm not sure that I've written any female characters who are 100% likable, just because that's not who I want to read about when I read a book. And so I tend not to think about it. There's also just so many things that would render a female character complex, but from another perspective would make her unsympathetic or unlikable. For instance, in the book, Frida is pretty selfish. Like a mom who's selfish already has quite a few strikes against her. But I think that I wanted to give her the full range of emotions and experiences and not have her be noble in any way. But in terms of the likable or unlikable characters, I had a lot of fun writing Gust and Susanna, even though I've heard that some people have like thrown the book across the room reading about them or started swearing about Gust being horrible. But I think what makes them interesting to write is that they're suffocating Frida with niceness. So their do-gooderness is part of what makes them crazy, but also they're not bad people. They're just selfish in their own way.
I think that was one of my favorite parts about reading the book. All of these characters are, they're so complex, and even in their unlikability, it makes you you're rooting for them because you're seeing that, like Gust and Susanna, it's like they have the best of intentions. They're just saying the absolute worst thing to Frida.
I think there was an article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago that came out right around pub where I think my book was mentioned in one sentence, and that was like the best thing ever. It was, I think it was.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
It was the anti-heroine of the moment, about the bad mom who leaves her kids being like a part of the zeitgeist right now, and so. But various people texted me that day to say, like, you're mentioned in the article of Maggie Gyllenhaal's movie. And so that was really exciting. But it was exciting also to just be part of a larger conversation about, I guess, making motherhood a little bit more realistic in how it's depicted in pop culture. And it's not like it's necessarily an everyday experience that a mom walks out on her child for an hour or for a whole year or anything like that. But I think that a lot of the works that have been talked about, like the film The Lost Daughter and the Claire Vaye Watkins novel, are getting at some of the thornier feelings, which for a long time moms haven't ever been allowed to say out loud.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even part of the discussion in like the new Sex and the City reboot is like, okay, now you're seeing me 20 years after I've had a kid, and now I'm thinking about what it was actually like to be a mom during this period. And am I allowed to talk about like what I liked or disliked about being a mom? And instead, sometimes there is this narrative that women are just supposed to know if they want to have kids, and then they're just immediately like they love every single moment of it. And I'm sure you love a lot of it, but like you said, it is much more interesting to have the just the context and the lots of different variances and experience to talk about. And I also just wanted to plug, speaking of conversation, there's just so many things to like talk about this book. I know there've been reviews where people are arguing about it. They're arguing about the ending. We're not going to give anything away, but it is, it's very discussion provoking. This was a Read with Jenna book club pick for the Today Show. So, congratulations there. This is such a great book club pick. And I was just wondering if you had any, you probably haven't spoken to many book clubs yet, but you did have a call with the Today Show team where you spoke to some book club readers. Have you gotten any really interesting questions from early readers or book clubs, or do you have a favorite question that people ask you about the book?
I think one question that's come up is how actually being a mom affected the writing of this book. I actually haven't met that many readers yet. I just went to Philly and Harrisburg, so I did meet readers, and I totally just shrieked at them when they got to the signing line. I'm like, you're in person. This is so exciting. And one question that came up is how being a mom affected the writing of the book. And for me, I think that it was like both human baby and book baby kind of grew up together because I was working so slowly and my baby was growing so fast. So I kind of wrote her infancy and toddlerhood into the book, but also the book gave me a home for when I was feeling frustrated or bored or just annoyed at something someone had said to me on the playground. I could just feed it into the book. So the fact that I was working on this project was definitely something that helped keep me more sane during the craziness of early parenthood.
Yeah, and one of the other pieces that I know people have talked about in some of their book club discussions, or at least I've seen a lot of commentary on, is the actual kind of world itself that you built. Like we talked earlier about this near dystopian, but there are some surprising characters that the mothers meet when they first arrive in the school, and I'm just wondering, like, how did you come up with some of those ideas, and like where did you find any particular inspiration for some of that world building?
Well, one book that has really been a touchstone for me in the writing of this one is I'm really in love with the novel Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I really love the mood or foreboding in that book, and capturing the sort of the tense, unsettling mood is something that I wanted throughout this novel. But one story that helped inspire the creation of the school was my friend Diane Cook. Her short story called Moving On from her first collection, Man v. Nature, was probably a direct inspiration for creating the school. And don't worry, Diane knows about this and she's fine with it. And also in the Rachel Aviv piece, I think one thing that really struck me with how all the government officials talked to the mother in that story was they spoke in this really clinical way about parenting, about things as subjective as love and tenderness. So I think that in some level of my subconscious or my imagination reminded me of science fiction in a way. So the surprising characters that you mentioned have been there since the very beginning, the very first draft, and the world of the school was there from the start. So it was more that I happened to start the book at a time when I felt really free and I felt like I had room to play. So I think that it's always just a struggle to get back to that state of total freedom.
And we actually have a question from the audience, semi-related. I know you just described Never Let Me Go as a book that had a huge impact on your writing for School for Good Mothers. But there's a question from Anne in the audience who asked, do you have a favorite author or someone who has inspired you to write? So I'm pushing a little bit more. You've already mentioned Never Let Me Go. Do you have other people in mind that help inspire you?
It's kind of a rotating list, but on the sentence level, I'm really inspired by the poet Anne Carson and the Danish author Dorothy Nors. Her short story collection, Karate Chop, is one of the best books ever. But I guess I'm always looking for new inspiration. And one book that came into my life while I was revising this manuscript was I started reading The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith, which I don't know how I got to my early 40s without ever having read that novel, because it was so instructive on the technical area of like building interiority and like sort of capturing the whole character's like inner life. And so that was really helpful to me in the writing of this book. But I love Emily Bronte, I love Marguerite Duras, I love Joan Didion, I love Michael Ondaatje. So I have my shelf of favorites, but I also love directing readers to more obscure novels like Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, which has been out of print for many years, but is about an unhappy housewife who falls in love with a sea creature from a nearby science lab. So it's going to be the perfect book that you've never heard of until now, and I recommend it to everyone.
It's a very memorable description too.
I need to go find that one now.
The other one of our other questions that we have been talking about before we got on was, when readers get to the school with Frida and the other mothers, they meet some interesting characters. But you also learn that there is a school for good fathers, and they begin to interact with each other and learn more about where what the fathers are going through versus what the mothers are going through. Could you talk a little bit about kind of where those inspirations came from, and just in this world, the expectations of mothers versus the expectations for fathers?
Well, I wanted the book to gesture toward the fact that moms and dads have different expectations placed on them by society. I think everyone expects fathers to do a good job, but I don't get the sense that fathers spend all their time feeling guilty about various things they said wrong, or like raising their voice or not paying enough attention. I mean, perhaps there are dads who do this. I have not personally met them yet, whereas all my female friends are very racked with guilt all the time, and I am too, about various things we did wrong or how we could have done better. And so I wanted the pressures on the dads to be a little bit lighter, and also just reflect the fact that the deck is really stacked against the moms in a different way. But my friend Keith Wilson, who's an award-winning poet, came up with the mantra for the father's school. So he was the one who suggested like that they should just have a whole different mantra. And what I wrote was that the dads would say, I am a father learning to be a better man, which is a much less shame-inducing mantra than the moms have to say.
Yeah, that's it. That like makes me so angry hearing.
That's one of my favorite parts, and also just like anger-inducing parts of the whole book. But.
Yes, I hope it's not too much of a spoiler. It's near the end, but hopefully everyone will like strike that from the memory of today's conversation and be surprised.
It will tease people into getting to the end. Another question from our audience, and again, please drop us a question in the comments below. You'll be entered for a chance to win a copy of Jasmine's book, and also an advanced reader copy of another novel coming out this summer. And this is a question from Pam. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on now, and will there be another book coming soon?
I wish I could say yes. I think in my dream life there will be, but I have to admit that I am a slow writer, and the first book took a very long time. Hopefully the second one won't take quite as long, but mostly I'm working on launching this book and doing the tour and press, and we're only about a month away from launching the book in the UK. So it's been an interesting exercise in learning how to talk about myself on a regular basis. And when I'm not doing that, I've been just trying to see my daughter, who's been kind of ignored for the last 5 weeks or so. But I'm excited to get back to writing fiction when things are a little quieter.
Well, I know we're going to have Holly jump in here, but I just wanted to also point out that you kept the Jenna pick a secret from your daughter, because she is now at the age where she repeats things. And so didn't you have to like keep things mum in the house?
The only people who knew were my husband, my psychiatrist, and my therapist. and then we didn't tell my parents until pub day. And that's how we ended up filming that video, is because we kept the secret for so long.
Yeah, so everyone should definitely go to Jasmine's Instagram, check out that video. It is so cute. Where her parents are being surprised and learning about something on national TV.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm not allowed to post anything else about them, so that's their contribution to my social media presence.
Well, I love that, and we wish you the best of luck on your tour, and we will be anxiously awaiting your newest novel whenever you decide to write that. That is about all we have time for today, unfortunately, but I wanted to thank you so much, Jasmine, for writing such a fantastic, discussion-worthy novel, and for joining us on Book Club Favorites. We really appreciate learning more about your novel and your writing process, and I also wanted to thank Megan and Elizabeth for providing such a great discussion today as well. And for all of those of you who are watching, please share this live with your friends and anyone who may enjoy Jasmine's novel. Starting tomorrow, February 1st, Book Club Favorites we'll be reading another new book, Circus of Wonders by Elizabeth McNeil. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on Instagram, and join our Facebook group so you can stay up to date on our latest book club pick and all the book club resources you might need. Thank you all again, and happy reading. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.